January 26, 1945, Holzwihr, France. A German soldier from the 2nd Mountain Division watched through the shattered window of an aid station as medics carried in the wounded. Only an hour earlier, 250 men and 6 tanks had attacked a single burning American tank destroyer. The man defending it was Lieutenant Audie Murphy. His weapon, the Browning M2.50 caliber machine gun. Within 60 minutes, that German force was reduced to just 70 survivors. The rest were dead, wounded, or running for their lives. The survivors spoke of only one thing. Not the bravery of their enemy, not the burning tank, but the weapon that had destroyed their attack. It wasn't a new German wonder weapon. It was a design from 1933, the M2 Browning heavy machine gun. Reliable, simple, devastating. Murphy, bleeding and alone, had climbed onto his burning M10 tank destroyer and turned its turret-mounted .50 cal against an entire German infantry company supported by armor. For over an hour he poured fire into the attackers, his position engulfed in smoke and flame. When the battle ended, roughly 50 Germans lay dead, and the attack had collapsed completely. That day would earn Murphy the Medal of Honor, and the M2 its reputation as the most feared weapon in the American arsenal. The power of industrial simplicity. By early 1945, German soldiers across Europe had learned to identify the M2's distinct rhythm. A deep, heavy pulse unlike the shrill roar of their own MG-42. Each burst sent 12.7 mm projectiles flying at nearly 900 meters per second. The impact was catastrophic. Wounds from .50 caliber fire were not survivable in the usual sense. A hit to an arm or leg meant amputation. A hit to the chest meant death. German medics learned to recognize .50 caliber wounds instantly. They were wide, torn, and hopeless. Soldiers hit by it were often left behind. Those who reached aid stations rarely made it further. Field hospitals along the Western Front recorded a growing number of psychological casualties. Men who weren't wounded but simply broke under the relentless sound of the M2. The machine gun didn't just kill bodies. It shattered morale. To understand why, you have to understand what the M2 was. It wasn't a miracle of engineering or a leap in firearms design. It was the perfection of function over form, a gun designed to work anywhere, forever. America's Iron Thunder. The Germans first felt the M2's full fury not on the ground but in the skies. September 1943, Stuttgart. 388 B-17 flying fortresses crossed into Germany on a daylight bombing raid. Confident Luftwaffe pilots dove toward them in FW-190s, each armed with 4 20mm cannons. But as they closed to firing range, something unexpected happened. The bombers erupted with fire. Not smoke, but muzzle flashes. Every B-17 carried 13 M2 machine guns. 36 bombers meant nearly 500 heavy machine guns spitting over 6,000 rounds a minute. German pilots flew straight into a steel storm. Their cannons fired explosive shells that could tear apart a bomber with a single hit, but they had to get close enough to aim. The .50 calibers reached out farther, faster, and more consistently. Luftwaffe aces who had shot down dozens of Spitfires suddenly found their aircraft riddled with holes before they could even fire. The sky became a killing zone, and for the first time, German pilots began to fear the American bomber formations more than the fighters escorting them. One ace, Oberleutnant Heinrich Wormheller, wrote home, "To attack the Americans is to fly through a storm of steel. You see the tracers 1 in 5, and know that for every tracer you see, for more bullets you cannot see are flying past." By late 1943, Luftwaffe tactics had changed. They tried head-on attacks, dives from above, climbs from below. It didn't matter. The Americans had arranged their bombers into combat boxes, 3D formations that overlapped defensive fire. Every direction was covered by multiple guns. There was no blind spot, no safe approach. And unlike German guns, which jammed frequently in high-altitude cold, the M2S simply didn't stop. They could fire thousands of rounds without failure. Crews replaced overheated barrels in minutes, wiped the breach with an oily rag, and kept shooting. One German pilot, Wolfgang Fischer, summarized it in post-war testimony. We called the bombers flying fortresses, but it was those machine guns that made them fortresses. They never stopped firing. They gave us no chance. Doctrine over design. To German engineers, the M2 was crude, slow-firing compared to the MG42, heavy and old-fashioned. But that was its genius. The Americans weren't chasing perfection. They were building an army that could function anywhere. Every B-17, every Sherman, every Jeep had a .50. Even supply trucks carried them. By mid-1944, American forces had deployed hundreds of thousands of M2s across Europe. They didn't rely on elite marksmen or complex tactics. Their doctrine was simple: fire more bullets than the enemy can survive. For the Germans, trained in precision fire and ammunition conservation, this was madness, but it worked. Units facing American convoys quickly learned that any ambush would be met with overwhelming return fire. Vehicles in the middle of the column carried .50s that could sweep both sides of the road. One would fire left, the next right. German ambush teams found themselves annihilated before they could reload. What had once been a symbol of craftsmanship, the German machine gunner, was now powerless against industrial warfare. The fear takes hold. By Normandy, the .50 caliber wasn't just a weapon. It was a sound that froze men in place. In hedgerow country, Americans used reconnaissance by fire, firing into tree lines or barns just to see if someone shot back. The Germans, who had once mocked the Americans as wasteful, learned that this wastefulness was lethal efficiency. Every burst of tracers cut through walls, hedges, and stone. There was no cover that could be trusted. Veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived the Red Army's artillery and massed infantry, said that American firepower was worse. The Soviets crushed you with numbers. The Americans drowned you in lead. The hatred that German soldiers developed for the M2 was not the hate of equals. It was the hatred of helplessness. They had built faster guns, more accurate cannons, and better tanks, but none of it mattered against an enemy whose simplest weapon could never be silenced. Storm of steel, air, ground dominance of the .50 cal. Dawn over Stuttgart, 1943. 36 B-17s climb in tight combat boxes. Each bomber carries 13 Browning M2s. That is nearly 500 heavy machine guns moving as one organism. When FW-190s roll into their attack runs, the first lesson arrives fast. The bombers are not prey. They are a moving fortress belt, stitching the sky with .50 caliber fire at more than 6,000 rounds per minute. Closing to 20 mm cannon range means entering a volume of fire that shreds wings, radiators, control surfaces, and the human beings inside cockpits. German pilots who survived called it a Stahlgewitter, a storm of steel. This was not only about firepower. It was about geometry. American formations stacked high, low, and fore aft to give each gun overlapping fields of fire. Nose, top turret, ball turret, waist, and tail positions interlocked so that every avenue of approach intersected multiple cones of .50 cal fire. Even if one gun jammed, 3 others picked up the arc. And the M2 rarely jammed. In the cold at altitude, where German cannons often choked, Brownings ran. Crews swapped overheated barrels in minutes. Gunners adjusted aim-off visible tracers and instantly walked bursts onto target. Volume, stability, and feedback loop fused into a system that punished any mistake with metal. Then the P-47 Thunderbolt amplified the message at treetop height. 8 wing-mounted M2s per aircraft meant a flight of 4 jugs could deliver 32 heavy machine guns on a single pass. Strafing runs opened at 600 to 800 meters, cutting roads, rail yards, columns, and fuel bozers to pieces. A single engagement might see a pilot burn through thousands of rounds across multiple targets because the .50 had the range, the punch, and the magazine depth to sustain attack after attack. Result: daylight movement under American airspace became self-destructive. German logistics slowed to a crawl, then to a stagger, then to darkness only. On the ground, the pattern repeated, scaled, and multiplied. U.S. doctrine mounted .50s everywhere. Turret top on Shermans and tank destroyers, ring mounts on half-tracks, pedestals on jeeps and trucks, and tripods in infantry heavy weapons platoons. A U.S. armored division moving in daylight carried hundreds of M2s. Columns practiced alternating fire, right side vehicles hosing the right tree line, left side vehicles the left, so any ambush was met with instant, symmetrical violence. German playbooks that worked against the British or Soviets: dislocate the middle of a convoy, block the road, then kill pockets, collapsed under the immediate crossfire of .50s from deep inside the column. Nothing embodied this more than the M16 multiple-gun motor carriage, 4M2S in a powered turret on a half-track. Designed for anti-air, it became a ground sweeper. Crews called it the meat chopper. Against infantry in hedgerows or town streets, the quad mount delivered a tearing wall of tracers that ripped foliage, timber, shutters, and thin masonry into deadly splinters. German squads that attempted to sprint between positions hit an invisible tripwire, an intersecting lattice of .50 arcs that turned movement into attrition. Urban fighting made the caliber's character obvious. Rifle and pistol caliber rounds died in plaster and brick. The .50 kept going, punching through walls, stairwells, and roof lines, collapsing the geometry defenders relied on. U.S. tank commanders learned a rhythm: halt at the corner, traverse the M2 to rake upper-story windows and suspected loopholes, then bound to the next intersection under a canopy of their own suppressive fire. Panzerfaust teams needed a second of exposure. The .50 stole that second. Aimed bursts chewed window frames, shattered optics, and drove defenders off angles that previously felt safe. Night turned fear into spectacle. American belts typically ran one tracer to 4 ball rounds, so every glowing line announced 4 invisible killers on the same path. Reconnaissance by fire at night was not guesswork. It was deliberate chemistry between light and psychology. A few seconds of M2 fire illuminated corridors of death that telegraphed a simple truth. Cover was complicated, concealment was insufficient, and luck had entered the tactics. New replacements often froze in the glow. Veterans learned to look away, but that did not stop the bullets. The tracers also gave U.S. gunners immediate correction. If a stream fell short, the next half-second of fire did not. Armor crews respected the .50 for different reasons. It would not pierce a tiger's nose, but it punished everything that made tanks lethal. Periscopes, sights, aerials, external stowage, and the thin skins of half-tracks and armored cars. From the flank or rear, it could perforate many vehicles. More critically, it peeled infantry away from tanks. German assaults depended on close infantry to screen armor, scout angles, and place Panzerfausts. Sustained .50 fire stripped that escort. Tanks isolated from their dismounts lost eyes, ears, and teeth. Underneath the ballistics lay the American operating system: mass, logistics, and permissive expenditure. The M2 was the end-user interface of an industrial empire. Ammunition trains flowed. Barrels, springs, and receivers arrived in depth. Units were told to fire when uncertain, not to hold for perfect certainty. That doctrine erased the gaps between detection and suppression. Against a force trained to conserve rounds and maneuver under brief lulls, a weapon that denied lulls was strategic. German reports from Normandy through the Bulge recorded the outcome. Disrupted marches, aborted counterattacks, convoy ambushes reversed, village defenses smothered, and a rising curve of psychiatric casualties tied to prolonged exposure to .50 fire. Soldiers learned that hedges leaked bullets, stone bled dust, and vehicles became kindling under strafing jugs. The hatred that grew around the M2 was not superstition. It was a rational response to a machine that turned distance, density, and time into a one-sided equation. Industrial war: why the .50 cal broke German doctrine and what it left behind. By late 1944, German commanders understood that something deeper than firepower was at work. The Browning M2 was not just a weapon. It was the instrument of a system that Germany could not match. The Third Reich produced superior optics, excellent barrels, and rapid-firing MG-42s, yet these advantages collapsed when set against a logistics network that delivered hundreds of thousands of reliable heavy machine guns and endless belts of ammunition. A system, not a gun. The M2 weighed nearly 40 kilograms with tripod. It was slow compared with the MG-42, but it was built to survive neglect, dust, cold, and heat. A single design served on aircraft, ships, vehicles, and ground mounts. Every part could be replaced by the same factories that built cars and refrigerators. Industrial standardization turned maintenance into a non-issue. American field manuals were blunt. Fire until target destroyed. Replace barrel. Continue fire. Ammunition supply lines followed the same logic. Where a German machine gun crew might be issued 1,800 rounds for an operation, an American half-track might carry 10,000. A U.S. armored division advancing through France consumed millions of rounds weekly and could be resupplied overnight. The rifleman aimed. The American heavy gunner saturated. Collapse of German doctrine. German infantry doctrine revolved around the general-purpose machine gun. The MG-42's blistering 200-round per minute rate anchored every squad. Tactics were built around controlled bursts, maneuver, and conservation. That model required discipline and ammunition that always arrived. By 1944, ammunition did not. Against the Americans, who blanketed every likely position with .50 caliber fire, German precision became irrelevant. Even a perfect flanking maneuver ended in suppression before it could unfold. Reports from the 21st Panzer Division at Normandy read, "The Americans need no superior tactics. Their fire never ends. Any movement draws attack. Urban battles finished the argument. The .50 could punch through outer walls, ricochet through stairwells, and kill men behind masonry who never saw their attacker. Houses that might withstand rifle and MG fire disintegrated under sustained M2 bursts. Tank commanders used the gun as a demolition tool, cutting apart building fronts before the main gun fired. A squad that lingered too long in an upper story ceased to exist. The psychological dimension. For soldiers, survival depended on faith in cover and concealment. The .50 took that faith away. At night, the glowing tracers of mixed belts showed soldiers exactly how doomed they were. Each visible streak carried 4 invisible companions. 1 gun firing for 10 seconds sent 50 rounds. 10 guns firing for 10 seconds sent 500. The math became personal. German interrogations after the war often cited this arithmetic terror. Soldiers could count their odds and found none. Veterans who had survived the Eastern Front, where artillery and Soviet mass assaults ruled, described the .50 as worse. Soviet bombardments ended. The American machine guns did not. The sound alone, deep, rhythmic, unhurried, meant exposure equaled death. After weeks of this, units lost cohesion. Some withdrew from strong positions without orders. Convinced resistance was mathematically impossible. General Alfred Schlemm, commander of the 1st Parachute Army, called it the sound of defeat. His post-war assessment admitted that by early 1945, every German soldier recognized the .50's rhythm and knew what it meant. Movement forbidden, initiative lost. Industrial logic wins wars. Germany entered the war believing that superior engineering and elite troops could offset material inferiority. The United States believed the opposite. Good enough weapons produced and supplied without limit would decide modern war. The M2 Browning became the proof. It turned every vehicle into a fire base, every bomber into a fortress, and every convoy into a killing zone. When General Fritz Bayerlein analyzed the failure of his Panzer Lehr division after Operation Cobra, he concluded that American heavy machine gun fire, not artillery, was what had paralyzed his men. It was everywhere, constant, and impossible to silence. American firepower doctrine replaced precision with volume and individual skill with system reliability. This approach changed warfare permanently. It taught every army that logistics outweigh brilliance, that reliability outlasts complexity, and that suppression is victory. The Germans hated the M2 because it made their professionalism irrelevant. Legacy. By 1945, the gun had become myth. Soldiers nicknamed it Ma Deuce, a symbol of blunt, unstoppable force. More than 350,000 heavy-barrel M2s were built during the war. The design barely changed afterward. It fought in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and continues to serve today. 8 decades on, its receiver geometry and operating cycle remain the same. Its longevity exposes the core truth of its creation. A simple mechanism, massive production, and a doctrine that valued endurance over elegance. The M2 was not beautiful, but it outlasted every superior weapon that faced it. The Germans, masters of engineering, learned that war in the industrial age rewards the side that can feed the gun forever. The M2 Browning was feared because it erased the boundary between tactics and arithmetic. It turned every engagement into a math problem that only one side could solve. For Germany, it was not just a machine gun that killed soldiers. It was a daily reminder that they were fighting an economy, not an army. And in that war of numbers, the .50 caliber Browning was the sound of inevitability.